On the late afternoon of November 27, 1998, 48-year-old Saon Naom, known as Solly, arrived home on Arden Road in Finchley, a residential area in North London. As he stepped out of his car, he was confronted by a man wearing a balaclava. Sensing the immediate danger, Solly tried to flee, but a gunman ruthlessly pursued him, shooting him several times in the back. Just steps away from his home, Solly collapsed to the ground. The assailant then approached him and with chilling composure fired 4 more shots into his head before calmly leaving the scene. The killer fled on a J-Reg 125cc black motorcycle with a distinctive yellow stripe running along its side. 8 months earlier, 37-year-old jeweller Gilbert Winter vanished without a trace. He was last seen leaving his family home near St Anne's Road in Tottenham around 8 AM on March 1st. Later that day he spoke to his girlfriend on the phone, but after that, he never used his phone again or accessed his bank account. He was reported missing 8 days later, and a month after his disappearance, his car was discovered in Spring Gardens, Woodford. Both Naom and Winter were no strangers to the authorities. Naom, a diamond merchant and underworld accountant, was reputedly involved in money laundering. Winter, on the other hand, had been acquitted of the 1994 murder of Claude Mosley, a former British high jump champion who had turned to drug dealing. Legend has it that Winter's remains are buried in concrete beneath the Millennium Dome. Terry Adams, a name that once sent shivers down the spines of many, was not just any criminal. He was one of Britain's most notorious gangsters, a figure who amassed a staggering fortune of £200 million through a web of illicit activities. In the 1980s, Terry and his brothers Tommy and Patsy, members of a large Irish family, formed the Clerkenwell crime syndicate, named after the area where it was based. Known as the Adams family, or the A-Team, the syndicate would go on to become one of the most powerful criminal organisations in the United Kingdom. At the height of his power, Terry was regarded by law enforcement as even more infamous than the legendary Kray twins, having held dominion over London's underbelly with an iron grip for nearly 50 years. His reign was marked by a chilling involvement in an estimated 25 murders, alongside countless violent assaults, as he orchestrated a substantial portion of the drug trade that plagued the city. Terence Terry George Adams was born in London on October 18, 1954. The eldest of 11 children in a Northern Irish Catholic family, he grew up in Barnsbury, a deprived area of Islington, where his childhood was shaped by hardship and adversity. His foray into the world of crime began at an early age, extorting money from classmates in the school playground. After leaving school at the tender age of 15, he rapidly escalated his criminal activities, initially running protection rackets for market stallholders and committing armed robberies. By the 1970s, his family syndicate shifted their focus to the more lucrative drug trade, forging connections with Colombian cartels and establishing an extensive network of dealers for cannabis, cocaine, and later on, ecstasy. The mafia-style empire Adams built thrived from the 1970s well into the early 2000s, making him a formidable force in the criminal underworld. By the early 1990s, Terry Adams had made so much money that he was able to retire at 35. Yet he told his mother he was a legitimate businessman. Adams regarded himself virtually untouchable, despite being one of the country's most prominent gangsters. He managed to avoid conviction for decades by keeping away from the dirty end of business. He had an infallible ability to keep his evidential distance from any of the violence and other crime. Adams ran his operation like a business executive, holding corporate-style meetings while his brothers enforced loyalty through intimidation and violence. One of the family's enforcers was Gilbert Winter, who had vanished without a trace in 1998. Allegedly, Winter had murdered drug dealer Claude Mosley in 1994 for stealing from the Adams family. Though tried for the crime, the case was dropped after key witnesses refused to testify, with one even opting for imprisonment over speaking out. With the profits flowing from his criminal enterprises, Adams purchased a lavish home for £1 million in cash, filling it with an impressive collection of valuable antiques and artworks, which included pieces by celebrated artists such as Henry Moore and Picasso. Among the decor was a life-size poster of Al Pacino as Tony Montana from the iconic film Scarface, a fitting tribute to his own life of crime. Additionally, he owned a holiday villa in Cyprus and a yacht, and funded his daughter Sky's education at the prestigious Sylvia Young Theatre School. However, this extravagant lifestyle was built on a foundation of brutality and bloodshed. The Adams Syndicate turned murder into a calculated strategy, adopting the mafia technique of employing gunmen on motorbikes for targeted assassinations. The 1980s brought fierce competition as a rival Irish gang, the Rileys, learned the hard way just how ruthless the Adams family could be. A conflict started after Patsy Adams insulted George Riley in a pub, right in front of his wife. The furious Riley went home and returned with his brothers and a gun, but they were ambushed by Adams' enforcers, who opened fire on their vehicle. Though no one was killed, the Rileys realised they were outmatched and abandoned their rivalry. For Terry Adams, violence was second nature, yet laundering the enormous sums generated by his criminal activities proved to be a more complex endeavour. In 1995, the Inland Revenue discovered that he had never paid a penny in income tax, despite his lavish lifestyle. Solly Naom, a Hatton Garden jeweller who assisted the gang in concealing its earnings, was enlisted to create false accounts that painted Adams as a jewellery designer. The case was ultimately settled with a £95,000 payment, but lingering suspicions continued to haunt Adams. 3 years later, Solly Naom was murdered on his doorstep, apparently at the hands of a rival gang, and the laundering scheme began to unravel. By that time, MI5 had been closely surveilling Adams. With listening bugs installed in his sitting room and bedroom, they gathered substantial evidence of his criminal activities. Among the recordings obtained were chilling conversations in which Adams discussed brutal beatings and plotted violent retribution against those who crossed him. In one particularly disturbing exchange, they heard Terry boast to a friend called Dan about a beating he'd personally administered. "When I hit someone with something, I do them damage," he said. "I went to the geezer and I went crack. On my baby's life, Dan, his kneecap came right out there. All white, Dan, all bone." In another instance, he callously ordered that a girl named Alicia have acid flung in her face. In addition, there were examples of extraordinary spendings, like tens of thousands of pounds on first-class flights around the globe, and £45,000 in cash on a Mercedes sports car for his daughter Sky. All the while, he claimed he had no income. Police raids on his residence subsequently yielded a staggering £500,000 worth of antiques, £48,000 in jewellery, and £59,000 in cash hidden away in a shoebox in the attic. The ensuing legal proceedings dragged on for years, complicated by Adams' tactics of frequently changing defence teams, and at one point even claiming that he could not understand the charges against him due to supposed low intelligence. Adams' first major downfall came in 2007, when he was imprisoned for money laundering, a charge that cost him part of his illicit fortune. He pleaded guilty to conspiring to launder criminal proceeds between 1997 and 2003, securing a courtroom deal that allowed his wife, Ruth, who also faced charges, to walk free. Although jailed for 7 years, he only served 3 and was released in 2010. However, his troubles didn't end there. Many of his closest allies and associates were also swept up in the law's grasp, facing their own legal battles. During this tumultuous period, 3 of his brothers, Patrick, Michael, and Thomas, affectionately known as Patsy, Mickey, and Tommy, found themselves behind bars as well. Yet, despite the mounting legal challenges and the crumbling of his once mighty empire, Adams still managed to maintain a lavish lifestyle. He was often spotted dining in upscale restaurants, clad in bespoke suits, and cruising in luxury vehicles. Yet he paid no tax, had no career, and claimed to be a marketing consultant earning £200 a week. However, his 2007 convictions subjected Adams to a financial reporting order, meaning that he had to disclose the sources of all cash and possessions worth more than £500. Since then, he's unavoidably been buried in legal troubles. Although despite the restrictions placed on him, Adams continued to find ways to circumvent justice. Nevertheless, in 2012, he was sent back to prison for failing to declare luxury purchases, which included a £7,500 facelift, a £2,200 Cartier watch, and membership of an exclusive Hertfordshire country club. Upon his release, he was ordered to repay £750,000 under a confiscation order connected to his previous conviction. Adams, claiming to be a man of limited means, responded by insisting he was a broken man living off his wife. Yet prosecutors countered that he had been indulging in luxury services, including gourmet meals and massages at the upscale Dorchester Hotel. By then, in 2014, Adams claimed to be living in an apartment near St Albans, Hertfordshire. However, 2 years later, he successfully convinced Camden Council that he'd lived in their borough for 5 of the preceding 7 years. The confiscation case continued until 2017, when a judge determined that Adams indeed had substantial means and threatened him with imprisonment unless he produced the cash within days. In a remarkable turn of events, Adams, the broken man, managed to find $730,000 in less than 24 hours, a feat that raised eyebrows. History repeated itself in August 2018, when he was ordered to pay £50,000 in prosecution costs owed to the Crown. Once again, Adams pleaded poverty, but when faced with a threat of immediate imprisonment, he miraculously produced the cash yet again. Despite his persistent claims of being a broken man, he remained free, continuing to navigate the system with a cunning that belied his circumstances. Meanwhile, Camden Council, responsible for some of the UK's most impoverished areas, found itself in a compromising position. A court hearing revealed that taxpayers had unknowingly subsidized Adams' lavish lifestyle. Despite the council's policy barring individuals with assets over £32,000 from council housing, Adams managed to secure a property for 18 months, paying just £160 a week in rent. During his stay, he had access to assets that exceeded the limit for council housing applications by an astonishing 25 times. How a notorious criminal with a reputation for breaking bodies and slashing faces secured such a sought-after property remains unclear. Known for his intense discipline, reportedly doing 2,000 press-ups daily in prison, Adams was not someone easily denied. Prior to his transition to the council house, Adams resided in a breathtaking Victorian terrace in the heart of Bloomsbury, an area surrounded by chic boutiques, vibrant wine bars, and esteemed cultural landmarks. This property, which London real estate agents hailed as a truly outstanding place to live, was valued between £2 million and £3 million. Living alongside local bankers, lawyers, and business magnates, the dapper Terry Adams shared this luxurious abode with his wife, Ruth, an actress celebrated for her minor roles in popular television shows such as EastEnders and The Bill. Terry Adams' ability to manipulate the system, whether through council housing applications or evading incarceration, serves as a stark reminder of the flaws within the legal framework that allow individuals like him to slip through the cracks of justice. Throughout his criminal career, he frequently relied on corrupt public officials to thwart investigations. A notable instance of this occurred in 1999, when a Crown Prosecution Service clerk named Mark Herbert was sentenced to prison for conspiring to leak sensitive information about 33 secret police informants to Adams' gang. Over the years, many of Adams' trials collapsed amid allegations of witness intimidation or resulted in acquittals. One particularly notable case involved David McKenzie, a financier who laundered drug money for the Adams family. After losing $1.5 million in failed investments, he was summoned to Adams' own, where he was brutally beaten by an associate named Christopher McCormack. Despite DNA evidence linking McCormack to the crime, he was acquitted, along with the jury accepting his explanation that Mackenzie's blood had come from an unrelated incident. Throughout their criminal endeavours, the Adams family adhered to the Code of Omerta, a code of silence that ensured that career criminals did not cooperate with police investigations. In 1991, for instance, notorious East End gangster Mad Frankie Fraser was shot in the head and nearly killed, a shooting widely believed to have been orchestrated by Patsy Adams. But when detectives asked Fraser who did it, he infamously replied with a distinctive Tutankhamun, reflecting the culture of silence and intimidation that permeated their world. By the time Terry Adams had been a fixture in London's gangland for 2 decades, he had cultivated a reputation as a cunning and sophisticated criminal. Wensley Clarkson, an author who's chronicled British gangs, commented that the Adams family represented the last of the traditional British crime families. They made their money and then sent their children to private schools, bought art, and invested in legitimate businesses, he remarked. Terry in particular is very bright. In another era, he could have led a major international corporation. Despite his relentless attempts to evade justice and maintain a luxurious lifestyle at the expense of taxpayers, Terry Adams' life story serves as a poignant illustration of the pervasive corruption and the formidable challenges that law enforcement faces in combating organised crime. His ability to exploit the system raises unsettling questions about how many others may be engaging in similar activities right under our noses. On a bustling Saturday afternoon in September 2014, chaos erupted at Harmon's Irish Bar, nestled in the upscale resort of Elveria, near Marbella. 2 gunmen stormed the bar, zeroing in on a 44-year-old man lounging on the terrace in green swim shorts, casually chatting with a woman. Without warning, they struck, firing 3 shots into his arm and 3 more into his back as he desperately tried to retreat into the bar for safety. Collapsing in the doorway, he was executed with 2 final shots to the head. A stray bullet pierced a nearby parked car. Witnesses had later described the assassins as eerily precise, like ninjas, one of whom was cloaked entirely in black. The pair made a swift escape in a BMW, its engine left idling near the bar, only for the vehicle to be found burnt out shortly after, near a supermarket 3 miles down the road to Marbella. It quickly became evident that the man executed in broad daylight was none other than Gerard Kavanagh, an Irish boxer who traded the ring for the perilous world of drug dealing. Kavanagh, once a major supplier in Tala, had relocated to Ben al-Medina, where he'd lived for nearly a decade before meeting his brutal end. His fate was sealed by his deep ties to the infamous Kinahan cartel, a connection that ultimately led to his downfall. Just 2 years after Kavanagh's assassination, his son Jamie, also a boxer, would narrowly escape death during the Notorious Regency Hotel attack. What was supposed to be a routine weigh-in for an upcoming fight turned into a scene of carnage as gunmen stormed the venue, killing gangster David Byrne. Gerard Kavanagh had carved out a fearsome reputation in Irish criminal circles as an enforcer, someone who could be relied upon to extract drug debts with ruthless efficiency. His role as muscle for the Kinahan gang extended across both Spain and Ireland, with Garda sources confirming his involvement in numerous acts of intimidation. As a key money collector for the Spain-based Irish drug lord Christy Kinahan, Kavanagh was once dispatched to Dublin to retrieve a £1 million debt from lower-level dealers. But when he failed to deliver, the penalty was swift and unforgiving. He was gunned down, paying the ultimate price for falling short in the deadly business he had chosen. Kavanagh once ran a lucrative criminal enterprise alongside his cousin, James Mulvey, originally from Solihull, a market town in the West Midlands of England. Their partnership was thrust into the spotlight in early 2008, when French police stopped them, ostensibly en route to Holland, each carrying substantial amounts of cash. This incident marked the early days of Mulvey's rapid rise in the criminal underworld, where he soon emerged as one of Britain's most prolific drug dealers. Kavanagh and Mulvey, along with 2 other associates, operated a Birmingham-based haulage firm, a front for laundering the massive profits generated from their global cocaine and cannabis operations. Mulvey, the Solihull mobster, lived a life of luxury and intrigue, orchestrating his drug empire from 5-star hotels around the world and his lavish hideaway in Spain. With deep ties to Birmingham, he managed numerous front businesses for a network of Irish gangsters. As he revelled in his extravagant lifestyle, Mulvey funneled millions through offshore havens like the Isle of Man, Monaco, and Mauritius. At one point, investigators uncovered nearly €10 million of mysterious funds credited to a single company in the Isle of Man. Mulvey's ill-gotten gains funded the construction of a €1.5 million Spanish villa, complete with indoor and outdoor pools, a private cinema, and a lift connecting its floors. He also owned multiple properties in the UK, adorned himself with high-end watches, cruised in luxury cars, and sustained a self-confessed over €1,000 a week cocaine habit. Back in England, his children attended elite private schools in Worcestershire and Somerset, their education funded by the proceeds of his criminal empire. Beyond his flashy investments in bars and nightclubs, like the now-closed Geisha Bar in Birmingham's Mailbox, James Mulvey orchestrated a vast criminal empire, using a tangled web of companies, including his Birmingham-based haulage firm JBS Transport, as a front for his international cocaine and cannabis empire. And mind you, Mulvey wasn't just a player, he was the linchpin connecting several powerful crime bosses. His shadowy operations extended across borders, including links to LS Active car sales in Bluebell, Dublin. The Irish High Court deemed the dealership a money laundering front for the notorious Byrne organised crime group. This company, which housed a fleet of luxury vehicles, served as a slush fund, enabling the mob to enjoy lavish lifestyles, attending high-profile boxing matches, and residing in 5-star hotels. Another key piece in Mulvey's criminal puzzle was the Mule State Foundation Trust. This front eventually helped Irish investigators tie Mulvey to Liam Byrne, a Kinahan associate and career criminal. By this time, Mulvey was deeply enmeshed in a vast drug wholesaling operation led by the Irish crime family, which maintained close connections to Birmingham. Mulvey was a pivotal figure in the Kinahan cartel's operations, who back then were embroiled in a gangland feud marked by tit-for-tat killings in Dublin and Marbella. One of his close associates within the cartel's upper echelons was Sean McGovern, who at one point even received a €155 cash payment from Mulvey. A 2008 investigation unveiled how the cocaine kingpin funded the purchase of McGovern's home in Kildare Road, South Dublin. Mulvey funneled €155,000 from Mauritius to secure the property, using the Mule State Foundation Trust. Mulvey claimed the payment to McGovern was provided for the purpose of real estate in Ireland. However, the NCA eventually unravelled Mulvey's intricate web of transactions, tracing the movement of funds from the Isle of Man to Monaco and then to Mauritius. Mulvey claimed the account was for the education and well-being of his family. But documents obtained by the UK's National Crime Agency told a different story. When NCA agents raided firms linked to Mulvey's offshore accounts, they discovered that Mulvey had left a note in his file in which he had written off McGovern's €155,000 loan, bizarrely citing McGovern's recent demise in a note. Why Mulvey referred to McGovern's demise remains a mystery. In his dealings with the cartel, Mulvey's cash was sent to McGovern to pay for the property before an extra €250,000 was spent on renovating the home, adding extra rooms and a gym without planning permission. But this gift would soon turn into a curse, as the property was seized by the Criminal Assets Bureau under Operation Lamp. Investigators from the NCA, working closely with CAB, believed that Mulvey's personal trust fund was a smokescreen to conceal profits from his global drug empire. As the Irish CAB zeroed in on Birmingham to dismantle the Kinahan cartel, tracing properties and luxury cars, it became clear that Mulvey was no stranger to UK authorities. West Midlands Police and the NCA had long known about Mulvey's role in providing the Kinahans with a crucial drug smuggling route into the UK, operating a sophisticated carousel between Europe, the West Midlands, and Ireland. Mulvey's deep ties to Ireland's most dangerous gang came to light only after British officers launched their own raids in London. This was prompted by the refusal of the company managing his funds in Mauritius to cooperate with Mauritian authorities. The fact that Mulvey erased a substantial debt owed to him by a top Kinahan cartel member underscores just how intertwined their operations were. He was willing to pay off McGovern's house debt because their partnership ran deep, rooted in years of collaboration on a global criminal stage. Mutual trust was built on a shared empire of illicit dealings. But everything changed after the brutal execution of his cousin, Gerard Kavanagh. Mulvey, once a fearless kingpin, became a man haunted by the spectre of the Kinahans. The power was evident in a series of secretly recorded phone calls.
He's no threat to me and I'm no threat to him. So that's what them texts are for. Do you understand? That's why he's texting me to see what my response is. As I says, well, I'm agreeing with him. If he thinks it's a problem.
Speaking to his girlfriend, he confessed, "Do you understand how these people work? If they can't get to me, they get to the people you love. They kill the people you love." In another call discussing Kinahan's right-hand man, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, who was on the run, Mulvey's voice trembled as he said, "They are that powerful. You got Daniel, fucking the Wig, Graham Whelan, Georgie, and him, Kavanagh. They're the most powerful group. The Irish are the most powerful and also the fucking maddest." He was asked if the cartel was madder than him. He fell silent, unable, or perhaps unwilling to answer. During the next chillingly recorded call, Mulvey's paranoia escalated when he revealed that notorious crime boss Daniel Kinahan suspected him of being a rat. His suspicion gnawed at Mulvey, feeding his growing paranoia. Mulvey also mentioned David Blinky Duffy, a hardened foot soldier for Bomber Kavanagh, who's now serving a 5-year sentence for his role in the botched assassination attempt on Hutch associate James Mago Gately in April 2017. Investigators believe Mulvey was alluding to cartel heavyweight Liam Byrne when he recounted a tense conversation. Fair play to Liam. Liam went and spoke to Daniel because Daniel pulled Liam. The ominous tone suggested just how deeply entrenched their criminal bonds were. In another call, Mulvey described a narrow escape involving Liam Byrne and Bomber Kavanagh in 2014. "I sat with Liam," he said, "and Liam told me how they were together when someone tried to take them out. They'd just had bulletproof glass installed days before. No one knew. They were inside the house when the gun jammed." As if Mulvey's own fears weren't enough, the National Crime Agency, NCA, had tapped his phones in 2014, capturing these dark confessions. At the same time, his opulent €1.5 million villa in Spain was being used by none other than Christy Kinahan's eldest son, Daniel. Daniel Kinahan was secretly recorded visiting the property, and investigators believe he was staying there while his relationship with Gary Hutch began to unravel over the cartel's failure to launder Hutch's cash from a tiger kidnapping. The tension between these dangerous figures only added to the storm brewing around Mulvey, who was caught in the deadly crossfire of the Kinahan Empire. Mulvey's ties to the Kinahan cartel ran deep, particularly with his cousin Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, who Spanish authorities once described as holding equal status to Daniel Kinahan within the Syndicate. The National Crime Agency noted, Mulvey was a trusted associate of Thomas Kavanagh. Those operating at the highest levels of criminality would only enter into agreements with those they trusted, even though it's widely believed that Bomber arranged for their cousin Hatchet to be shot dead after Daniel Kinahan convinced him that he was plotting to kidnap one of his children and hold him for ransom. The reasons for Ashet's murder stay murky as the whole tale does not make any sense. Why kill over a supposedly missing €1 million, when such an amount could easily be missed? And kidnap is about the highest risk crime there is. Yet Bomber believed Daniel's word, and Ashet was gunned down in cold blood. Operating within the shadowy world of organised crime, Mulvey went to extraordinary lengths to evade law enforcement. He lived like a ghost, leaving no conventional traces in the UK. For 7 years, he bounced from one luxury hotel to another, always paying in cash, often funneled through third parties. He never stayed in one place for long and relied on burner phones, which he switched daily to stay off the grid. Despite spending up to €85,000 a week and flaunting his wealth across the globe, he never used bank accounts and remained a phantom to the authorities. As the police tightened their grip on a sophisticated smuggling ring he was deeply embedded in, Mulvey fled to Spain, hoping to outrun the law that was fast closing in. But then, in 2017, Mulvey's aura of invincibility was shattered. After a 2-year covert investigation by the National Crime Agency, NCA, Mulvey was dramatically arrested at gunpoint by Lithuanian special forces. His capture, under a European arrest warrant, marked the culmination of a decade-long criminal inquiry into a smuggling ring dating back to 2007. While his associates had already been prosecuted and jailed, Mulvey had managed to slip through the cracks, until now. Mulvey and his crew had been orchestrating a large-scale drug operation, smuggling contraband from Belgium into England, and then onto Ireland. The drugs were ingeniously concealed inside hollow industrial metal rollers, transported by lorries across Europe. The consignments, packed with cocaine and cannabis, were funneled through a network of haulage companies and individuals, making their way from Holland to Ireland via Belgium and the West Midlands. One of the key transit points for this illicit cargo was a haulage yard in the quiet village of Inkborough, Worcestershire, an area best known as the inspiration for BBC Radio 4's fictional setting of Ambridge in The Archers. Little did anyone suspect that this sleepy village was a crucial node in Mulvey's international drug empire. The scheme unravelled thanks to a sharp-eyed Belgian warehouse worker who noticed that the same metal rollers kept returning to the depot. Sensing something was off, he tipped off the police. Belgian investigators then partnered with UK law enforcement to carry out a controlled delivery of one of the suspicious shipments to Nares in Dublin via Worcestershire in February 2007. When they opened the industrial rollers, they uncovered a staggering haul: 20 blocks of cocaine, 364 blocks of cannabis, and 10 blocks of phenacetin, a cutting agent for cocaine. Shockingly, around 14 other shipments had already slipped through undetected. The bust led to several arrests, including lorry driver Jeffrey Edwards and transport manager Barry Phipps. Both men were hit hard by the law. Phipps received 25 years, and Edwards 20 years, for conspiring to supply drugs following their trial at Birmingham Crown Court in 2009. But Mulvey, the mastermind behind the operation, managed to evade capture. Sensing the walls closing in, he fled to Spain just days before Edwards and Phipps were arrested in August 2007. At the time, there wasn't enough evidence to charge him, but the investigation didn't stop. Mulvey might have believed that by staying out of sight, he'd be out of mind, that after 5 years, the NCA would eventually forget about him. But the NCA has a long memory and an even longer reach. In 2012, Mulvey returned to the UK when his father fell ill. This gave British officers the opportunity to put him under closer scrutiny. 3 years later, in 2015, West Midlands Police handed the case over to the NCA's Birmingham team. They launched a sophisticated surveillance operation, employing covert tactics, intricate mobile phone analysis, and sifting through over 20 million documents across 9 countries. Despite Mulvey's best efforts to remain a ghost, operating without bank accounts and leaving little paper trail, the NCA's forensic accountants tracked his movements, inching ever closer. The net was closing in, and this time, there'd be no escape. The investigation peeled back the layers of Mulvey's criminal empire, revealing how he used his legitimate hauling firm as a front to transport cocaine and cannabis, concealed within those metal rollers stored in the quiet village of Inkborough. During a crucial interception, Mulvey even admitted his role in the conspiracy. Mulvey's operation was sophisticated. He employed accountants, advisors, and offshore trusts to launder millions. One particularly brazen transaction involved €13.1 million funneled to a single business. Investigators painstakingly traced these illicit funds through thousands of documents, uncovering a web of companies in the Isle of Man used to hide his profits. The investigation even reached as far as Mauritius, where local police teamed up with the UK's Financial Intelligence Unit to raid properties in the village of Tamarin, seizing documents and digital devices. Mulvey orchestrated numerous shipments to the continent, cleverly arranging cover loads of tinfoil or toilet paper destined for Ireland to maintain the illusion of legitimate business. In total, he successfully smuggled drugs on 14 occasions before his luck ran out during the 15th trip, when Belgian authorities intercepted the contraband. These 15 trips moved drugs with an estimated street value of 18 million euros. His downfall came on March 28, 2017, when Lithuanian special forces stormed his hideout in Kavanagh. The arrest was as dramatic as his life. Mulvey, half naked, was captured in photos, sitting on a sofa with guns pointed at him. And in another image, he was sprawled on the floor under the watchful eye of armed officers. The arrest was the culmination of an investigation involving 150 investigators from Spain, Portugal, Brazil, Ireland, and Lithuania. After a 10-week trial in June 2018, Mulvey was found guilty of masterminding the import of 80 million euros worth of cocaine and cannabis into Britain between 2006 and 2007. He was sentenced to 32 years in Birmingham Crown Court. Yet, whispers circulated that it was actually bomber Kavanagh pulling the strings behind the massive drug plot, slipping through the net while Mulvey took the fall. Following his sentencing, the NCA made it clear that their work was far from over. They continued to dig into Mulvey's finances under the Proceeds of Crime Act, determined to ensure he wouldn't benefit from his criminal past. The hunt for 7.5 million euros in missing drug money remains ongoing, with law enforcement hot on the trail. The day before Christmas Eve 1989, Terry Goodrum and his partner Maxine Arnold were enjoying a quiet evening in their Walthamstow flat when they were kidnapped and forced to drive to Epping Forest. The next day, Arnold's mother arrived at the flat to find their half-eaten meal with sausages and mashed potatoes still on the table, with the gas fire and the Christmas tree lights left on, a haunting snapshot of their interrupted evening. At 3:50 a.m, a police patrol car discovered their bodies lying in undergrowth in Epping Forest. Both had been shot, execution style, in the back of the head, with a post-mortem suggesting Goodrum was killed first. His Mercedes 190E stood nearby with the engine still running. The murder remains unsolved, but reports suggest Goodrum, a bar stocktaker, was silenced to prevent him from exposing a lorry hijacking scam linked to a pub protection racket involving an associate of the Cray twins. 3 years later, journalist Peter Wilson received a tip from a police source implicating notorious gangster David Hunt in the killings. Born in 1961 in Canning Town, David Hunt was the youngest of 13 children. He claimed his upbringing by Christian parents instilled in him a strong work ethic. However, whether his wealth came from hard work or something more sinister remains a different story. After leaving school at 16, Hunt became an amateur boxer, earning a reputation as a ferocious fighter. While succeeding in the boxing world, he provided security for pubs and clubs, worked part-time as a scaffolder, and dealt scrap metal. However, he'd soon climbed the underworld ranks. In 1988, police launched Operation Tiger, an investigation targeting leading criminals in the Plaistow area. The investigation revealed Hunt at the centre of a vast criminal web, providing protection to pubs and clubs, and allegedly engaging in prostitution in Soho. While several arrests were made, Hunt remained untouched. Nevertheless, Hunt was linked to the unsolved murders of Maxine Arnold and Terry Goodrum, prompting journalist Peter Wilson to investigate his potential involvement. Wilson went to Hunt's home and, upon finding him out, explained to Hunt's wife the nature of his inquiry. Hunt, however, was far from pleased. When Wilson returned to the house later, Hunt confronted him and headbutted him. Though Hunt was arrested for the assault, Wilson ultimately withdrew his complaint. In 1994, Hunt was arrested again and charged with causing grievous bodily harm to a man named Stuart Everett at a Racing Pigeon Federation event. He was acquitted of the offence in November 1995. By then, Hunt had built a scrap metal business and created offshore companies to avoid taxes. Investigators found he hadn't paid taxes from 1982 to 1996, despite posing as an employer. Hunt admitted to falsifying employment details for loans and mortgages. Although he insisted he was a legitimate businessman, he ultimately paid over £1 million in taxes. Hunt's name surfaced again in 2006, when police searched his Essex golf club and discovered stolen cases of Bollinger champagne traced back to a recent lorry theft. Meanwhile, Hunt maintained his public image as a successful business magnate. However, a 2002 police investigation codenamed Operation Tiberius which examined crime groups in North and East London, discovered the existence of the Hunt Syndicate. Police found that the group was involved in various criminal activities and had consistently evaded prosecution by using corrupt police contacts and intimidating witnesses. Even police officers were not safe from their tactics. The crime gang were uncovered by the crime squad in Naom, East London, when a scrapyard in Canning Town and a nearby facility was searched for stolen metal. The search revealed 42 containers filled with goods from 18 lorry thefts and a commercial burglary. Despite the compelling evidence, the case collapsed like many others before it. Hunt continues to deny these allegations, claiming he's never corrupted police officers or intimidated witnesses. Reports suggest that Hunt began his criminal career with lorry hijackings in the mid-1980s as a member of a gang known as the Snipers, which operated in Essex and East London. The gang was notorious for violent crime and often carried out work for more established criminals. By 1985, Hunt had climbed the ranks, transitioning from executing crimes to orchestrating gang operations. Over time, he moved into more serious crimes, including drug trafficking, arms smuggling, money laundering, and even murder. He partnered with notorious gangster Terry Adams, profiting significantly from London's booming cocaine trade. Journalist Michael Gillard investigated Hunt extensively, revealing how Hunt profited from the compulsory purchase of the land for the Olympic Park, funded by a £20 million government grant. He had tracked Hunt's activities since 1999, but believed the Olympic developments warranted further investigation due to criminal families benefiting from taxpayer money. On May 23, 2010, Gillard's article, Underworld Kings Cash In on Taxpayer Land Fund, exposed Hunt's operations, though the article wasn't entirely focused on him. The article's main picture featured Terry Adams, with a caption stating that Adams' family, along with David Hunt, was allegedly involved in land deals near the 2012 Olympic site. The article revealed that some of Britain's most notorious crime syndicates were seeking a share of a £20 million government fund intended for land regeneration. One criminal family had already received nearly £2 million, while other beneficiaries were linked to murder, drug trafficking, and fraud. The report also mentioned that Hunt's involvement had sparked a violent turf war and triggered a large-scale police corruption inquiry. Hunt was infuriated by the article and filed a libel case against the publication. This wasn't his first time dealing with negative press, but the result of this case turned out to be far more damaging than bad publicity. At the time, the Olympic site was being regenerated, and many criminal syndicates were exploiting the opportunity while benefiting from public funds. Journalist Michael Gillard later shared that when he began investigating Hunt, the gangster appeared to be transitioning into a legitimate businessman. Hunt had made significant investments, including a scrap metal yard on the Thames in Dagenham, a 20-acre mansion, and stakes in entertainment venues like the Epping Forest Country Club. On paper, Hunt was a mere freelance scaffolder, but his mortgage applications often misrepresented his income. Despite his apparent legitimacy, Hunt remained a tax ghost. Hunt's rise was remarkable, from a football hooligan to a criminal godfather in a short span. His ascent from running with the West Ham lads to mingling with wealthy business owners was driven by extreme violence. A night out for Hunt often involved a fight. On one occasion, he challenged and assaulted Gary Stretch, the former British light heavyweight boxing champion, leaving the champ bruised. His fearsome reputation made witnesses think twice before informing on him, Hunt's version of insurance. Known in gangland circles as Longfella, due to his towering 6'5" height, Hunt also had connections with notorious criminals, including Reggie Cray, whom he visited in prison in 2000 shortly before Cray's death. Hunt later claimed these visits were purely social, denying any criminal discussions. Hunt's violent streak extended beyond bar brawls. In 1997, he slashed a man's face in a fit of rage, leaving his victim, Paul Kavanagh, with a 15cm laceration from ear to chin that required life-saving treatment. Kavanagh was subsequently threatened to prevent him from testifying. This brutal attack came to light during Operation Blackjack, when the Metropolitan Police installed bugging devices in a car showroom and inadvertently recorded the incident. Kavanagh had apparently angered one of Hunt's associates, and the response was swift and severe, a hallmark of Hunt's violent and fearsome legacy. Hunt was arrested and charged with the attack on Kavanagh, but the case never progressed. Kavanagh withdrew his statement after being intimidated into silence, forcing the prosecution to drop the charges. Another shocking incident came to light in 2006, when Hunt and his associates attacked property developer Billy Allen in a London courthouse. Allen was feuding with Charles Sheep Matthews over land, and Matthews enlisted Hunt by labelling Allen an informant. Hunt aimed to sell the land to the Adams family for profit. The courthouse attack was brutal. Hunt arrived with a group of heavies and assaulted Allen in broad daylight. The police arrived to find the walls and floor covered in blood, yet no criminal proceedings were initiated against Hunt. The incident once again demonstrated Hunt's influence and his ability to deploy violence publicly without consequences, a privilege more fitting to the head of a criminal enterprise than a legitimate businessman. When Gillard's 2010 articles about Hunt had appeared in the Sunday Times, accusing Hunt of running a vast criminal network, Hunt decided to sue him. However, the judge in the libel case later acknowledged that Hunt's company, GRL, was indeed a front for money laundering. The company invested Hunt's criminal proceeds into property, including the Soho building that operated as a clip joint, sex shop, and prostitution base from 1995 to 2001. Hunt claimed he was unaware of the prostitution activities taking place in the Soho property he owned, but the judge wasn't convinced. Hunt's pattern of violence, intimidation, and financial manipulation painted a clear picture. Behind the facade of a successful businessman was a criminal mastermind who ruled with fear and violence. He didn't abandon his tactics of fear and intimidation. Even during his libel trial, he used every trick in the book to disrupt the proceedings. The Sunday Times hired 5 professional security guards to protect its witnesses. But on the second day of the trial, the guards walked off the job after being approached in a pub. One security firm outright refused to take the assignment, clearly intimidated by Hunt's reputation. The trial provided a comprehensive review of Hunt's life, including the police investigations that named him. Hunt, however, defended himself by claiming that his name had been unfairly associated with criminal activity since the late 1980s. He argued that the police had fabricated his reputation as a violent figure. Hunt also tried to play the victim card, claiming that the article shocked him and deeply affected him. He further testified that he'd been arrested 7 times in the 1980s, but had moved on from working in his brother's scrap business to running a lucrative land and property enterprise in London, reportedly earning at least £30,000 a week. In 2013, after losing the libel case against the Sunday Times, question arose about the origins of his extravagant lifestyle. His criminal activities were now public knowledge. The judge described Hunt as the head of an organised crime network involved in extreme violence and fraud, concluding that Hunt had used threats and intimidation to scare witnesses and evade prosecution. Despite his repeated insistence that he had done nothing wrong, Hunt did not appeal the verdict, a decision that ultimately backfired. His case became the first official ruling to document his criminal activities, even though it was a civil libel case rather than a criminal trial. The court heard evidence of numerous police investigations, surveillance operations, and task forces targeting Hunt. Agencies like the Serious Organised Crime Agency, SOCA, had monitored him extensively, yet he only had a single minor conviction on record. Hunt was well known in gangland circles as the Longfella and was implicated in violence, intimidation, money laundering, and profiting from prostitution. One investigative report even labelled him too big for the Metropolitan Police to tackle. While the judge ruled that the Sunday Times had not definitively proven Hunt's involvement in drug trafficking or contract killings, the ruling favoured journalist Michael Gillard. However, Gillard's victory came with personal costs. After the story broke, he could no longer move freely around London or attend public events. He even skipped the ceremony where he was named Journalist of the Year due to safety concerns. As for Hunt, the fallout from his courtroom defeat didn't end with public humiliation. In 2014, just months after the libel judgment, he made headlines again, this time for receiving a £1 million loan from David Sullivan, a millionaire businessman and co-owner of West Ham United FC. The loan, issued through Sullivan's finance firm GCN 102, was made 3 months after Hunt's criminal status became public. Hunt owed the Sunday Times £85,000 in legal costs at the time. Curiously, £55,000 was paid the day after the loan was granted, and the remaining £30,000 followed 10 days later. The loan was secured against several of Hunt's properties, including a golf club in Essex and a restaurant previously owned by actor Sean Connery and former West Ham captain Bobby Moore. David Hunt's access to financial resources seemed unaffected by his criminal reputation. While Barclays Bank called in a £4.2 million loan after learning of his libel case, Lloyds Bank, partly taxpayer-owned at the time, lent him up to £4 million, despite public records identifying him as the head of a crime syndicate. Hunt's audacity and influence extended beyond financial dealings. In a shocking twist, he allegedly contracted a hit on detectives investigating his case. When the detectives reported the threat, they faced suspicion and a 2-year investigation based on false evidence. In 2016, they sued the Metropolitan Police for obstruction. Operation Tiberius had already identified Hunt's syndicate as one of North East London's most violent criminal groups. The report concluded that Hunt and his associates maintained their invulnerability by corrupting police officers and intimidating witnesses into silence. Despite law enforcement's efforts, Hunt's influence, violence, and connections allowed his criminal enterprise to evade justice for years. David Hunt's criminal enterprise was responsible for a series of violent assaults on debtors and rivals, with narcotics importation and protection as its primary operations. However, Hunt's ability to operate freely for decades was largely due to corruption within the Metropolitan Police. The Met's anti-corruption team identified 4 detectives colluding with Hunt, leaking investigation details, tracking devices, and intelligence database information to the Syndicate. Despite substantial evidence, Hunt consistently avoided convictions. More than 30 investigations into his criminal activities were reportedly derailed through police corruption or witness intimidation. Hunt managed to evade prosecution for 30 years, as victims frequently withdrew their complaints due to fear and intimidation. His only conviction came at age 26 for handling a weapon, resulting in a 9-month suspended sentence. An unusual incident in 2020 provided a rare glimpse into Hunt's private life. His son pinned a handwritten note on the village green, pleading with neighbours to stop shooting their pet racing pigeons. The letter's polite tone stood in stark contrast to the family's violent history. Hunt continues to live with his wife Tina and their adult children in a lavish mansion purchased in 1993. In the early hours of November 26, 1983, 6 masked men broke into the Brinksmat warehouse at Unit 7 of Heathrow International Trading Estate near London's Heathrow Airport. Their way in, an inside man, one of the security guards, who unlocked the doors and let them access the building. But brute force sealed their control. Once inside, the gang doused terrified staff members in petrol, threatening to set them alight unless they revealed the vault's combination. At first, the robbers believed they were making off with a modest haul, around £1 million worth of Spanish pesetas. But what they stumbled upon was beyond their wildest expectations. Sitting outside the main vault, ready for transfer to Hong Kong the next day, were 152 bars of pure gold bullion, 3 tons, 3,000 kilos of it, packed into 76 cardboard boxes. And that wasn't all. The thieves also seized platinum, 1,000 carats of diamonds, and $250,000 in traveller's checks. By the time they fled, the gang had pulled off one of the most audacious heists in British history, walking away with a staggering £26 million in loot, equivalent to over £111 million today. The sheer weight of their unexpected gold haul made transporting it a challenge, but selling it would have been an even bigger hurdle, if not for the expertise of master launderer Kenneth Noy and savvy gold dealer John Palmer. John Palmer's rise from poverty to power was as unlikely as it was ruthless. Born in 1950 and raised in Solihull, he was one of 7 children in a struggling single-parent household. Though Solihull wasn't considered deprived, his family teetered on the edge of poverty. He often relied on teachers to keep spare clothes for him, and his unkempt appearance earned him the cruel nickname Sticky Palmer from classmates. School held little appeal. He was a serial truant who never learned to read, write, or count, but Palmer wasn't destined to fade into obscurity. At just 15, he left school and started selling paraffin off the back of a lorry, determined to shake off his childhood humiliation. Seeking a fresh start, he moved to Bedminster, Bristol, and took up work as a jewellery dealer, a trade that some might say ignited his appetite for precious metals. With an undeniable knack for business and an ever-growing web of connections, Palmer quickly became a man about town. Despite being illiterate, he had a natural instinct for deals, and by the age of 20, he had made his first £100,000, equivalent to over £1 million today. But his ambitions didn't stop there. He founded Scadlin, a Bedminster-based company that traded in scrap precious metals, a lucrative operation that soon attracted clientele with more than just business on their minds. Criminals looking to recycle stolen gold found Palmer more than willing to accommodate them, setting him on a path that would intertwine with one of the most infamous heists in British history. His most audacious act of recycling was without a doubt the Brinks Mac gold. His role in the infamous 1983 heist cemented his reputation and earned him the nickname Goldfinger. While 2 members of the gang were quickly caught, the gold itself vanished, along with the other criminals involved, including Kenneth Noy and Palmer. As a jewellery dealer, Palmer knew his way around gold, but his involvement wasn't just about expertise, it was a necessity. The Brinks Mac bullion was far too pure to be sold without raising suspicion, especially with law enforcement hunting the masterminds behind the robbery. To avoid detection, the gold needed more than just melting down. It had to be disguised, mixed with other metals to erase its origins. That's where Palmer came in. By the time of the heist, he had already built a life of wealth and respectability, moving with his wife and 2 daughters to a small Georgian mansion on the outskirts of Bath. Designed by the renowned architect John Wood the Younger, the house sat on 30 acres of land, plenty of space for secrets to stay hidden. Within this estate, Palmer set up a smelter, transforming the stolen gold into something untraceable. From there, the profits were funneled through a local bank in Bedminster, ensuring the dirty money was cleaned and ready to be spent. A now defunct branch of Barclays became the unlikely hub of a multi-million-pound money laundering operation. Despite burly men regularly strolling in with plastic bin bags stuffed with cash, the bank seemingly raised no eyebrows. In fact, the bank didn't just turn a blind eye, they adapted. They hired extra staff and even stocked up on more £50 notes to keep up with the influx of dirty money. Palmer's trusted associate, Garth Chappell, handled withdrawals, at one point pulling out as much as £120,000 a day, an astonishing sum that barely made a dent in a £13 million funneled through the branch. But the scheme couldn't last forever. When police began closing in on those suspected of laundering the Brinks Mac gold, Palmer slipped away to Spain. That same year, Scotland Yard named him as one of 20 most wanted fugitives at a request of the Spanish Interior Ministry. For a time, Spain was his safe haven, until the law caught up with him again. A new regulation required fugitives to have a valid passport to remain in the country. When Palmer's expired in 1986, his options dwindled. After failing to gain entry into Brazil, he had little choice but to return to the UK, where he was promptly arrested and put on trial for handling Brinks Mac gold. Palmer always insisted he had no idea the Brinks Mac gold was stolen. In an interview with renowned war reporter Kate Adie, he defiantly claimed, "I'm completely innocent of anything to do with this so-called Matt's Brink bullion raid." Whether the slip, saying the name backwards, was a genuine mistake or a calculated move, it later played in his favour. His lawyer, Henry Milner, recalled using it in court. Unless he was given an Oscar-worthy performance, it showed he truly didn't know anything about the robbery itself. Incredibly, the jury at the Old Bailey bought it. Despite the hidden gold smelter at his mansion and clear ties to Scadlin, Palmer convinced them he had no clue he was melting down stolen gold. In 1987 he was acquitted, blowing kisses to the jury from the dock as the verdict was delivered. But while Palmer walked free, Garth Chappell wasn't so lucky. He was sentenced to 10 years behind bars. Kenneth Noy, another key figure in the operation, received 14 years. However, in 2000, Noy was sentenced to life after killing a motorist in a road rage incident on the M25. It's believed that Palmer orchestrated his escape, having him flown by helicopter to France before continuing to southern Spain in his private jet, where he evaded capture for 2 years. Yet even after the convictions, the Brinks Mac mystery remained unsolved. Worth around £500 million in today's money, most of the gold was never recovered, and the case remains open to this day. In a decade following his acquittal, Palmer appeared to be keeping a low profile, but behind the scenes, he was building an empire. He returned to Spain, where he struck gold once again, this time in Tenerife's booming timeshare market. Starting with £30,000 borrowed from his brother, Palmer rapidly expanded his operations. Before long, he was pouring £5 million into the development of 450 timeshare villas, a venture projected to rake in a staggering £72 million. Marketed as the ultimate experience, the island village resort quickly became anything but for thousands of timeshare buyers. What was supposed to be a dream investment turned into a financial and legal nightmare, trapping victims in a labyrinth of hidden fees, broken promises, and endless legal battles. Many paid far more than their original investment, only to be left with nothing but shattered nerves and empty wallets. Palmer, however, remained firmly in control. using a web of companies spanning England, the Isle of Man, and Tenerife. He tightened his grip on the villa complex, expanding his empire with the help of an army of enforcers. These touts, mainly desperate British expats looking for work, prowled Tenerife's tourist hotspots, luring in holidaymakers with free champagne and gifts for their children. Their pitch? A slice of paradise in a luxury timeshare villa. But Palmer's scam didn't stop there. He was selling dreams that didn't yet exist, convincing buyers to invest in apartments that hadn't even been built yet. The kicker? The construction of these very apartments depended on the money from unwitting holidaymakers. Palmer wasn't just selling timeshares, he was selling thin air. Palmer's empire was run by fear, violence, and ruthless intimidation. Intelligence from Spain's national police and the paramilitary civil guard leaked to the media, painted a dark picture, linking him and his associates to a web of fraud, protection rackets, extortion, violent assaults, death threats, money laundering, and even dealings with the Russian mafia. His name became synonymous with street violence in the nightlife hotspots of Playa de las Americas and Los Cristianos, where brawls and brutal attacks were routine. Again and again, witnesses identified the same culprits, Palmer's so-called security men. Knowing he was a marked man, Palmer often wore body armor as he moved through his kingdom of fear. The streets ran red with knife fights and baseball bat beatings, while cars were torched and properties left in ruins. Stabbings were frequent, and in one turf war over a lucrative timeshare trade, a British man was shot dead. Palmer's reign extended beyond real estate scams. Rival timeshare touts were forced to pay extortion fees just to operate, while bars peddling sex and drugs had to hand over protection money to stay in business. If intimidation or violence from Palmer's enforcers failed, they could rely on two powerful South American figures, known as the Sharks, who cruised around the resort in a black limousine. One of Palmer's companies operated sales offices in Russia, where, according to a national police report, the tactics used were more aligned with mafia-style operations than lawful business practices. In 1994, the Cook Report television programme secretly recorded Palmer offering to launder up to £60 million a year for an investigator posing as a heroin trafficker. Palmer demanded 25% commission, boasting, "I'm not cheap, but I'm good." Palmer's wealth allowed him to indulge in an extravagant lifestyle, acquiring a French chateau complete with its own golf course, a £3.5 million private jet, 2 helicopters, a collection of classic cars, and a £6 million yacht named the Brave Goose of Essex. At the time, he was considered one of the largest landowners in the Canary Islands, living a life of celebrity glamour with a stunning wife and a string of mistresses. By the late 1990s, his fortune had surpassed £300 million, placing him on par with the Queen in the Sunday Times rich list. However, Palmer knew he was taking a dangerous risk, having left around 20,000 victims, mostly British pensioners, out of pocket to the tune of €45 million. Eventually, justice caught up with him. His timeshare empire had expanded beyond its means, while outside gangsters began muscling in, turning the scene increasingly violent. This chaos was compounded by Palmer's escalated cocaine addiction. Though his scams had earned him millions from thousands of victims in 2001, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his role in the Spanish fraud by London's Old Bailey. Palmer defended himself, claiming that his vast wealth meant he had no need to be involved in such fraud. He served 4 years in prison, but emerged bankrupt, deeply in debt, and without his prized possessions, all of which had been sold off. By 2005, Palmer was penniless. During his trial, Palmer claimed that detectives were targeting him out of vengeance for his 1987 acquittal. He'd been under surveillance by the Secret Service for 16 years and was considered one of Britain's most wanted criminals. In 1999, the Serious Organised Crime Agency, SOCA, formed a special unit dedicated to capturing Palmer, reflecting his prominence as a top UK criminal. This unit was based 300 miles from London at an RAF base in Cumbria to avoid corrupt police influences. SOCA's caution was later justified when an internal investigation by the Metropolitan Police revealed that Palmer had assistance from within the force. 6 senior officers were found to be helping him, possibly even tipping him off about profitable robberies. At the height of his criminal activities, Palmer was known to wear a bulletproof vest under his designer suits at all times. However, he didn't continue this habit upon returning to England. If he believed he was no longer at risk, he was gravely mistaken. On June 24, 2015, police and paramedics were called to Palmer's Essex home on Sandpit Lane, South Weald, following reports of a cardiac arrest. Initially, his death seemed non-suspicious due to pre-existing injuries from recent surgery. However, further examination raised doubts, and a post-mortem was conducted. Over a week later, it was revealed that Palmer had been shot in the chest. 2 Essex police officers who were first on the scene were later disciplined for failing to recognise the gunshot wound. The investigation later confirmed that Palmer was murdered. On the day of his death, he was last seen on CCTV at 5:18 p.m, burning old documents on a bonfire in his garden. Around 5:30 p.m, it's believed his killer entered the garden by climbing over the fence and shot him 6 times, from the only part of the garden not covered by CCTV. A mortally wounded Palmer managed to stagger a short distance toward his house before collapsing. He was found by relatives who immediately called for help, but Palmer succumbed to his injuries. His partner and former mistress, Christina Ketley, believes Palmer had been stalked in the days leading up to his death, with the killer watching him through a spile in the 5-foot garden fence of his secluded woodland home. Police released crime scene photos showing the hole in the fence panel, which was likely made with a nail or sharp object, along with a bullet recovered from the scene. Since the murder, detectives have extensively investigated Palmer's past and connections, both in the UK and abroad. They've gathered intelligence, taken hundreds of witness statements, traced vehicles, examined over 1,400 documents, and followed more than 700 leads. Despite these efforts, Palmer's killer remains unidentified, leaving his family without justice. His family insists he had turned his life around before his death, but he was due to stand trial in Madrid for real estate fraud, following an 8-year investigation. Some believe this testimony could have been damaging, explaining the contract-style execution, likely carried out with a silenced .32 caliber pistol. Another theory suggests he may have been a police informant, which would have posed a significant threat to those in the criminal underworld. Authorities believe his past finally caught up with him in the form of a professional hitman.